The noise and music from the downtown lounge bled into the night, a chaotic symphony of chatter and bass. My heart was pounding, my steps quick as I clutched the bottle of electrolyte water and painkillers I brought for my wife. She never could hold her liquor, and I couldn't stand the thought of her suffering. But as I reached the frosted glass door of the private room, ready to push it open, I heard her voice, so familiar, yet each word was a shard of ice driving straight into my heart. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of vows I thought were unbreakable, of a life built together, reduced in her words to a cold, hard business calculation. I froze, the blood turning to ice in my veins. So that's all it was. A 7-year transaction. Fine. If this was just business, then I'd be the one to close the deal. A cold certainty settled over me. Later, in a sterile hospital room, I would stand over her bandaged form as the machines beeped a lonely rhythm. I would look at what was left of her, the love and affection I once felt long since burned away by rage and disappointment. And without a moment's hesitation, I would reach out and disconnect the tube. In that final moment, I would see tears well in her eyes and trace paths down her cheeks. Whether they were tears of regret or something else, I would no longer care. The night sky over Denver was a thick, inky black. I sat in the dim light of our living room, the glow of my phone illuminating a new text message from my wife. Hey babe, Stacy's throwing a get-together, totally last minute. Have to go. I'll be home late. A wave of worry, an old, familiar reflex, washed over me. Her stomach was a wreck, a souvenir from the early years when she was grinding to build her company, surviving on coffee and sheer will. A little too much alcohol, and she'd be up all night in agony. Without a second thought, I grabbed the Advil from the drawer, threw on a jacket, and rushed out the door. Inside vibe, the light was hazy and intimate, psychedelic patterns dancing in the air. The thumping bass of the music was a physical force, a drumbeat against my chest. I stood at the door to her private booth, my hand raised to knock, when a man's laughter echoed from within. I frowned. Claire's nights out with her girlfriends never included men. Before I could process it, a waiter carrying a tray laden with drinks strode toward the door. I instinctively stepped aside, melting into the shadows of the hallway. As the door swung open, a burst of music and conversation spilled out. Claire, you've got some serious nerve, a voice chirped. It was Stacy, her best friend, her tone dripping with the kind of teasing that loves to stir up trouble. Keeping a college boy on the side while you're married to Brandon White? And you're not even trying to hide him. Aren't you worried Brandon will lose his mind? Yeah, spill, another friend chimed in. How do you manage to have your cake and eat it too? Claire just laughed a low, throaty sound. We've been married forever. Brandon's fine, but there's no spark anymore, you know? She paused, then added with a dismissive wave of her hand. Besides, Brandon will never find out. And even if he did, what's he going to do about it? A surge of hot anger rushed to my head. Before I could react, I heard Stacy press her. So what's the deal with you and Brandon, really? You guys were childhood sweethearts. Claire snorted, and the sound was like a knife twisting in my gut. Her next words dripped with contempt. The White family is washed up. What future does Brandon have? Honestly, if White Industries wasn't still marginally useful, I would have divorced him ages ago. In that instant, the world tilted on its axis. An invisible hand closed around my heart, squeezing until I could barely breathe. Before I could recover, I heard the friends asking if the college boy was getting a promotion. Claire's voice was careless. He's just a toy. When I'm bored, I'll throw some money at him and send him on his way. You don't take something like that seriously. The room spun. My feet felt nailed to the floor, Claire's cruel words echoing in my mind. The woman I had cherished for more than a decade was a stranger. Our history, our vows, all that was just a punchline to her. If it wasn't for the last shred of reason holding me back, I would have stormed in there and torn the place apart. But if she chose betrayal, I wouldn't let her get away with it. White Industries is washed up. Fine. The Shin family will pay the price. And the price would be more than enough to cover our losses. I took a deep, steadying breath, turned around, and walked out of the lounge. Back at our house in Cherry Hills, I went straight to my study and drew the heavy blackout curtains, shutting out the moon and the city. Darkness swallowed me whole. I sank into my leather chair and lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dark like a malevolent eye. Claire Shun and I were the real deal, childhood sweethearts. From meeting in elementary school to walking down the aisle after college, our lives had been intertwined. There was never some dramatic new guy beats the childhood sweetheart story. I had always believed our bond was unbreakable, destined to last a lifetime. But in recent years, White Industries had been struggling. Part of it was due to our own strategic missteps, but a much larger part was because of our partnership with her family's company, Synopsis. To make Claire happy, I'd willingly conceded deal after deal, giving her family favorable terms. I was the sole heir to White Industries, and she was the only child of the Shuns. I naively thought, it's all in the family. As long as we weren't losing money, it was just my way of showing her I loved her. Now I saw the truth. My generosity wasn't love to her. It was a weakness to be exploited. She'd forgotten everything my family had done for hers, forgotten the heart I had laid at her feet. She took it all for granted and then stabbed me in the back. If she wanted to be ruthless, I would show her what ruthless really looked like. I would make her vomit back every last thing she had taken, with interest. White Industries might be down, but we weren't out. A wounded lion is still a lion. Our foundations were deep. Synopsis, on the other hand, had gotten arrogant from its recent success. And after years of deep collaboration, I knew where all of Synopsis' skeletons were buried. Claire, you're going to regret this. Divorce was off the table. In my family, we had a saying, you leave the marriage through death, not divorce. Betrayal demanded punishment, and her ending would be a humiliating one. I sat in my study all night, sleepless, my mind a cold engine of vengeance and calculation. Meanwhile, Claire was out, partying until dawn. The first rays of morning pierced the gap in the curtains. Claire dragged herself home, looking exhausted. The clothes she wore weren't the ones she'd left in. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes were hazy from a long night of drinking. She saw me at the dining table eating breakfast and didn't even flinch. As if nothing was wrong, she sat down beside me, a harmless smile plastered on her face. Hey, babe, I was out with Stacy and the girls so late. I didn't want to wake you, so I just got a hotel room. I watched her lie so smoothly, and a cold smile touched my lips. She'd clearly had practice. I didn't call her on it. Instead, I gave her the same gentle smile I always did. No problem. If you're with Stacy, I know you're safe. My words were calm, but inside, a storm was raging. We used to have a rule. Always come home, and if you absolutely couldn't, you called. But over the last year, as White Industries struggled with a disastrous overseas expansion, things at home had changed. Her nights out became more frequent, and our rule was just another promise she had forgotten. I stared at Claire's face, my eyes tracing every line, searching for a flicker of guilt, a hint of unease. But she was a fortress, her expression perfectly composed. She smiled, acting every bit the loving wife, as if she hadn't just committed the ultimate act of betrayal. Looking at this woman, so familiar yet so alien, a profound sense of sorrow washed over me. The girl I put on a pedestal, loved with everything I had, was now an expert performer in this twisted charade, with me as her unwitting audience. As I sat there, lost in a silent storm of anger and grief, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down at the screen. The caller ID read, Dylan, assistant. My heart went cold. I knew perfectly well that Dylan, assistant, was the college kid she was sleeping with. I'd had my own assistant do some digging. It had taken him less than a night to put a complete file on my desk. His name was Dylan Zhao, a senior at the University of Denver. I'd seen his picture. I had to admit, the kid was good-looking. No wonder Claire was so taken with him. To cover her tracks, she'd given him a fake title, executive assistant at Synopsis, but he was really just her personal gopher, making it easy for them to meet up. Claire answered the phone, her face a mask of professional calm. There was no panic, only a strange, unreadable glint in her eyes. I no longer cared what it meant. In my mind, she was already tainted, something to be discarded. She muttered a few quick ahas into the phone and hung up. Turning to me, she put on a look of sincere, yet utterly fake, apology. Honey, something's come up at the office. I have to run. I forced a smile. Of course. She slipped back into her designer heels and walked out, her hips swaying. I watched her go, then let out a bitter, self-mocking laugh. Synopsis was planning a major push into the European market. Just a few days ago, I've been planning to risk White Industries' capital to blaze a trail for her. Now, I realized that overseas project might not be a risk after all. It might just be the perfect centerpiece for my revenge. I didn't go home for a week. I threw myself into a whirlwind of meetings and negotiations, every handshake, every decision a carefully placed piece in my growing game of revenge. The day Claire finally tracked me down, I was just smilingly sending a Mr. Smith in his town car. Brandon was that Mr. Smithson. Claire didn't bother asking why I'd been gone a week. Her eyes were fixed on the departing car, her expression a mix of urgency and greed. I nodded, putting on a perfectly apologetic smile. My voice was gentle, sincere. Yeah. Hey, Claire, I'm so sorry. It's been a crazy week. I completely forgot to call. I've been in back-to-back meetings with Smithson's people, trying to hammer out this deal. I've barely had time to breathe. Baby, as soon as this is over, I promise I'll make it up to you, okay? Maybe I was just that good at hiding my emotions, or maybe the promise of a lucrative deal had blinded her. But after a moment of scrutiny, she seemed to buy it. She bit her lip, choosing her words carefully. So, how far along are you with the Smithson deal? I hid my cold smile. My voice was that of the ever-supportive husband. We just signed a framework agreement today. There are still details to iron out, but it's pretty much a done deal. I made a show of rubbing my temples, feigning exhaustion. She immediately switched into supportive wife mode, reaching out to massage my shoulders. I sidestepped her touch before her fingers could make contact. Her hands froze in midair. A flicker of awkwardness and surprise crossed her face, but she quickly suppressed it. Brandon, honestly, Smithson was in talks with ShinCorp too. This is a huge opportunity, and I really think ShinCorp is in a better position to take the lead. What do you think? She looked at me, her eyes filled with a hopeful, anxious light. I let a small, ambiguous smile play on my lips. In business, I said slowly, it's every company for itself. Her own smile froze on her face. In the past, anything she asked for, she got. She clearly wasn't used to this new resistance. After a long pause, she tried again, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. Brandon, I know this contract is important for White Industries, but it's critical for ShinCorp too. For us. Couldn't you just let me have this one? I almost laughed out loud at her audacity. I'd handed her company deal after deal, helping drive my own family's business into the ground. And in return, she'd treated me with nothing but contempt. I slowly opened my desk drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and tossed on the desk in front of her. My voice was flat. This is what you want. Take a look. Without thinking, she grabbed the envelope and tore it open. The moment she saw the contents, the color drained from her face. She looked like she'd been punched in the gut. Inside were a few glossy photos. In them, Dylan Zhao was posing, wearing a custom-made watch, leaning against a brand-new Lotus, a cocky grin on his face. Brandon, what is this? She asked, still trying to play dumb. Her acting was pathetic. We had a break-in at the house, Claire, I said, my voice dangerously calm. What do you think we should do about it? She forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. Don't be dramatic. It's just a few pictures. That's not a break-in. I laughed softly, tapping one of the photos with my finger. Look closely at the watch. It's the custom piece we had made for our anniversary. I paused. In the car. That license plate looked familiar. I seem to recall it was the one you gave me for my birthday last year. She finally looked up, her eyes meeting my cold, smiling gaze. For the first time I saw it. Pure panic. She looked like a cornered animal. Brandon, I remember now. That's Dylan, a new intern at my company. I had him run by the house to pick something up for me. He's just a kid, probably never seen stuff like that before, so he took a few pictures. Don't worry, I'll deal with him as soon as I get back to the office. She rushed the words out, a clumsy attempt to patch a story full of holes. I just stared at her, my contempt growing, but I wasn't going to blow up. Yelling was beneath me. My revenge would be quiet, precise, and lethal. The car is one thing, but the watch was in the safe. That's not just curiosity, Claire. That's theft. I leaned back in my chair. I think we should call the police. I wonder what the sentence is for stealing a watch worth $300,000. I nodded to my assistant, who immediately reached for his phone. Claire's face went white. She lunged forward and grabbed his arm. She knew that if the police got involved, the whole sordid affair would come out. The Smithson deal would be dead, and ShinCorp itself could be ruined. As diminished as White Industries was, we still had enough power to crush her company if we really wanted to. Brandon, please, she begged, her voice trembling. It's a small thing. It's not worth getting angry over. Just give me some time. One day. Just one day, and I promise I'll give you a satisfactory answer. Okay. I gave a slight nod. Fine. Leaning back, I watched her already plotting my next move. Claire stumbled out of my office, her composure shattering the moment she was inside her car. She clawed at her hair, her eyes wild and bloodshot, letting out a low, guttural scream like a caged animal. No, she would not let this happen. She would not lose the Smithson contract, and she would not lose her grip on Brandon's company. The Shun family had been nothing, a minor player in the business world, until White Industries had lifted them up, guiding them all the way to their IPO. For years, her family had been a leech, sucking the lifeblood from my company to build their own empire. She couldn't imagine falling from that height, losing everything and being thrown back into obscurity. The car tore through the streets, screeching to a halt outside Dylan's apartment building. Fueled by pure rage, Claire kicked the door open. The loud bang echoed through the apartment, making Dylan jump. He was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. The sudden intrusion sent a jolt of terror through him. His face went pale, and he scrambled to his feet. Before he could even form a question, Claire was on him, her foot connecting hard with his stomach. Ugh! Dylan cried out, the air knocked from his lungs. He flew backward, crashing to the floor as his phone skittered across the hardwood. He stared up at her, his eyes wide with fear and confusion, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He had no idea what was happening. "Kneel," Claire commanded, her voice like ice. Dylan didn't hesitate. He knew his place. He was her plaything, her pet, and in the face of her fury, defiance wasn't an option. He scrambled to his knees with a thud. Slap! The sound of her hand connecting with his face was sharp and clear. A bright red handprint instantly appeared on his left cheek. Without being told, like a well-trained dog, he offered her his other cheek, his expression a pathetic mask of submission. Half an hour later, Claire's arm was sore. She was tired of hitting him, but the fire inside her still blazed. "Hit yourself," she ordered, her voice raspy. Dylan obeyed instantly. Though he still didn't understand what he'd done wrong, his benefactor's command was law. He raised his hands and began slapping himself, the rhythmic thwacks filling the silent apartment. He was probably regretting everything. He thought he'd hit the jackpot with a rich sugar mama, but he never realized how dangerous a young, beautiful, and utterly ruthless woman could be. "Tell me," Claire said, her arms crossed as she looked down at him with cold disdain, "why did you post those pictures of the watch and the car on Instagram?" She knew exactly what had happened. She had brought him to the house, and she had taken the watch out of the safe to show it off. She would never give something so valuable to a nobody like him. The pictures were found by my assistant, easily scraped from Dylan's public profile. The reason for his beating finally clicked in Dylan's mind. Ignoring his swollen, throbbing face, he forced a pitiful smile. "Claire, I'm so sorry. I was just being stupid. I really didn't think anything of it." By now, some of Claire's fury had subsided. She knew deep down that this was her own fault. "In a little while, you're coming with me to apologize to my husband," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You know what to say and what not to say. He's the CEO of White Industries. If you want to live, you'll keep your mouth shut." Dylan nodded frantically. He'd already made up his mind. As soon as this was over, he was taking the money he'd managed to siphon from her and getting the hell out of Denver. He was about to graduate, and he'd saved up a decent nest egg. He never seriously thought he could replace her husband. Continuing this game was too risky. He was starting to think he might not get out of it alive. From the comfort of my leather office chair, I watched them. Dylan was kneeling on the floor, trembling, while Claire stood beside him, a forced, anxious smile plastered on her face. A deep sense of satisfaction washed over me. This was power. They were two mice caught in my trap, and I was the one who would decide their fate. "Mr. White, I swear I was just being stupid," Dylan pleaded, his voice cracking. The bruises on his face were a testament to Claire's fury. "I was just curious. I beg, miss. Shouldn't have let me see the watch. I had no other intentions, I promise." Claire chimed in, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "That's right, Brandon. It was all a misunderstanding. I went back to the house and checked. The watch is perfectly safe. See? I brought it for you." She carefully took the custom timepiece from her handbag and held it out to me with both hands, like a humble offering. I watched their pathetic performance in silence. It wasn't time to reveal my hand just yet. I needed to let the game play out a little longer to lead them deeper into the maze I had built. A slight, pleasant smile touched my lips. "If it was just a misunderstanding, then we'll let it go this time," I said, my tone gentle. "But Claire, you need to be more careful. For a minute there, I almost thought you were cheating on me." My gaze locked onto hers, sharp and knowing, daring her to lie. She stiffened, a flash of panic in her eyes, but she was a veteran of the boardroom. She recovered in a heartbeat, shifting into the role of a pouting, playful wife. "Brandon, how could you even think that? You know me. You're the only one for me. I'll love you forever." I had to stop myself from laughing. The only person Claire Shin loved was herself. This woman, whom I had once worshipped, had betrayed me for profit without a second thought. It was utterly sickening. "Brandon," she began, sensing her opening about Mr. Smithson. I smiled, a slow, meaningful smile. "Letting Shin Corp take the lead on the contract is no problem," I said smoothly. "But right now, Shin Corp hasn't shown enough sincerity to convince Mr. Smithson. You'll have to work on that yourself." I tilted my head slightly, my gaze flicking toward the door where my assistant was leading Dylan out. Claire was sharp. She understood my meaning instantly. She knew that her affair wasn't secret, that I was just choosing not to make it public. Her face paled, and she bit her lip, a flicker of defiance in her eyes before it was replaced by resignation. She nodded stiffly. In that moment, Claire finally realized that the man she had been married to for 7 years wasn't the good-natured pushover she thought he was. And she learned that a diminished White Industries was still more than capable of tearing her world apart. Claire's methods were swift and brutal. Just as Dylan reached the entrance of his apartment complex, a black sedan lost control, swerving wildly and slamming into him. The force of the impact sent him flying through the air like a rag doll before he crashed to the pavement, unconscious. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked for over 10 hours to save his life. Claire hadn't wanted him dead. A murder investigation would be a complication she didn't need. But in every other respect, she was merciless. Take back everything he has, she ordered her assistant from her office, her tone sharp and impatient. And get him expelled from the university. The assistant hesitated. Ms. Shun, isn't that a bit extreme? What if he decides to retaliate, to go public with everything? Claire let out a cold laugh. He won't. It's not even clear if he'll survive this. And if he does, I'll just cut him a big check. That's all he ever wanted from me anyway. Right now, securing the Smithson deal and getting back in Brandon's good graces are all that matters. And so, Dylan's world collapsed. An anonymous tip, along with a mountain of evidence detailing his chronic absences and cheating on exams, was sent to the university. Under immense public pressure, the University of Denver expelled him for gross violations of the Student Code of Conduct. Simultaneously, Claire's legal team moved in. The downtown condo, the sports car, the designer clothes, everything she had ever given him was repossessed. After a year of playing the part of kept man, Dylan was left with nothing but the paltry sum in his bank account, money Claire couldn't legally touch. After finishing her dirty work, she came straight to my office. She wore a smile of pure subservience, her demeanor as meek as a dog begging for forgiveness. I knew it was an act, 90% theater, but seeing her like this brought a grim satisfaction. She was finally remembering her place. Brandon, that irresponsible assistant, has been dealt with. Permanently. Are you satisfied? She asked, her eyes searching my face for approval. I gave a slight nod. Her methods were crude, but effective. She was ruthless, though not particularly clever, leaving loose ends that could come back to haunt her. But that wasn't my problem. Good work, I said, my voice flat. We've finalized the deal with Smithson Group. Go ahead and take it over. I waved a dismissive hand, signaling she could leave. Claire didn't say another word. Like a subordinate receiving an order, she quietly followed my assistant out of the office. As I watched her go, I leaned back in my chair, already planning the next phase. For the next 6 months, an uneasy peace settled between Claire and me. We never spoke of what had happened. It was as if the incident had been erased from our history. But I knew the truth. Some cracks can never be repaired. The most telling change was that we now slept in separate bedrooms. I told her it was my obsession with cleanliness. The truth was I couldn't bear to have her touch me. The very thought of it made my skin crawl. The partnership between Shun Corp and Smithson Group started off brilliantly. The deal was structured in three-month phases. After the first phase, Shun Corp had successfully established a foothold in the European market, turning a small but significant profit. Morale at her company soared. Phase 2 was even better. Shun Corp's profits skyrocketed to an astonishing $50 million. In just 6 months, her company had transformed from a mid-level player into a genuine powerhouse, rivaling White Industries in everything but legacy. But in Phase 3, everything fell apart. The problems started subtly and then cascaded. First, their domestic suppliers began failing, causing constant disruptions to the supply chain. Then, their bank loans were mysteriously delayed, pushing the company to the brink of a liquidity crisis. Shun Corp was in chaos. Claire came to me, looking haggard, with dark circles under her eyes. Brandon, she said, her voice tight with anxiety, something feels wrong. It's like someone is intentionally targeting us. What do you think? She stared at me, her eyes filled with suspicion, as if she knew I was the puppet master pulling the strings. She was right, of course. It was all my doing, but what could she do about it? I feigned a look of concern. It is strange, Claire, but it's not surprising. Shun Corp has grown so fast. You're bound to make some enemies. Someone's probably trying to cut you down to size. I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Does White Industries need to step in? The offer was clear. My help would come at a price. She understood immediately, but she hesitated, chewing on her lower lip. Finally, she forced a brittle smile. Thanks, Brandon, but I'm going to try to handle this myself first. I can't rely on you for everything, can I? Ever since her affair was exposed, she had been outwardly pleasant but deeply paranoid. She'd even doubled the number of bodyguards around her. It was almost amusing. Before our marriage, I'd been known for being ruthless in the Denver business world. Claire was too greedy. She couldn't bear the thought of giving up a single ounce of the power she'd gained. She was still dreaming of a day when Shun Corp would completely eclipse White Industries with her on top. She had no idea that my trap had already been sprung. The show was just getting interesting. While Claire was frantically trying to save her crumbling empire, Dylan Zhao was lying in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling with hollow, vacant eyes. The only sound in the sterile room was the faint, rhythmic beep of the medical equipment, a dismal soundtrack to his ruined life. He had woken up from his coma a week ago, and the full extent of his catastrophe had slowly dawned on him. He didn't much care about being expelled. A diploma was just a piece of paper. But losing the condo and the car, that cut him to the bone. He had debased himself for those things, catered to Claire's every whim, and now they were gone. The injustice of it all burned in his gut. What stung most, however, was Claire's utter indifference. The first thing he'd done upon waking was ask for her. He'd been hoping for a final, massive payout, enough money to leave Denver and start over. But a week had passed, and there had been no visit, not even a phone call. His heartbreak curdled into pure hatred as he overheard the nurses talking outside his door. "That guy in 302 is so pathetic," one nurse whispered. "Chasing after a rich woman and ending up like this. What an idiot." "He's not an idiot," another replied with a smirk. "I'm sure he got plenty out of it while it lasted. Still, that Ms. Shun is cold as ice. Hasn't visited him once. He was just a toy to her. Why would she care? Besides, I heard she and her husband, Mr. White, are doing great now." "Oh, for sure. They're childhood sweethearts, after all. Her parents are flying in from Europe next week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with them." The gossip grew louder. "That's so romantic. Every year their anniversary is all over the news. I wish I could find a love like that." Dylan lay motionless, every word a needle piercing his soul. At first, his face was a mask of pure rage, his hands clenching the bedsheets until his knuckles were white. But then, as he listened, a new light flickered in his eyes, a cold, vengeful gleam. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't notice the thick envelopes tucked into each of the nurses' pockets. If he had looked inside, he would have found them stuffed with crisp $100 bills. Claire's parents were indeed coming back, but the wedding anniversary was just a cover story. Their real purpose was to pull Shun Corp out of the nosedive it was in. They were old-school players, veterans of countless boardroom wars, with a network and a ruthlessness that made Claire look like an amateur. With him in the picture, the crisis might actually be resolved. It seemed Claire was truly desperate to call in her semi-retired parents. If that was the case, it was time to escalate my revenge. The petty sabotage, overwatering the plants in her office, bribing the cleaning crew to unplug her server, was child's play. It was time for the finale. "Brandon, are you coming with me to the airport?" Claire asked, her eyes full of a hopeful, almost desperate light. I smiled, a warm, gentle expression that didn't reach my eyes. I reached out and playfully ruffled her hair, a gesture that was intimate yet completely devoid of warmth. "I'll pass on the airport traffic, Claire. You go pick them up and head straight to the Capitol Grill. I'll go ahead and make sure we have the best table." She didn't suspect a thing. With a small, relieved smile, she turned and walked to her car, her entourage of assistants and bodyguards in tow. Over the last 6 months, her paranoia had only deepened. She thought her little precautions could protect her. She had no idea she was playing a game I had mastered years ago. I checked my watch. It was almost time. Everything was proceeding according to plan. I waited at the restaurant, feeling nothing, like an actor waiting for his cue in a play whose ending was already written. A few minutes later, my assistant rushed in, his face a mixture of gravity and something I couldn't quite decipher. "Mr. White," he said, his voice low. "Ms. Shun has been in a car accident. They're rushing her to the hospital now." I nodded slowly, then stood up, my voice perfectly calm, as if discussing a stranger. "Let's go." To the hospital. The moment I walked through the hospital's automatic doors, into the sterile smell of antiseptic, I was met not by a doctor, but by Claire's frantic, pale-faced assistant. "Mr. White, thank God you're here. It's bad. Ms. Shun and her parents. They're in surgery, but it's critical. You need to prepare yourself." His voice trembled with a mixture of fear and shock. I gave him a brief nod, my expression unreadable, then walked over to a police officer who was taking notes nearby. "Officer, I'm Brandon White, Claire Shun's husband. Can you tell me what happened?" My voice was steady, my gaze locked on his. The officer's eyes softened with pity. He took a deep breath before speaking. "Mr. White, I'm very sorry. This was not an accident. We're going to need your cooperation with the investigation. As he spoke, the horrifying scene of the crash began to form in my mind. Dylan, stewing in his hospital bed, had grown twisted with resentment. Overhearing the nurse's chatter about Claire's trip to the airport was the final push. He had slipped out of the hospital unnoticed and found a delivery truck parked nearby, the keys still in the ignition. Consumed by a desire for revenge, he had driven that truck straight into Claire's car. The scene, the officer said, was one of utter devastation. When the first responders arrived, they found a mangled wreck of metal and fire. The truck had been carrying a commercial shipment of barbecue spices, which had spilled everywhere in the collision. As the vehicles burned, the smell of roasting meat filled the air, a sickening, unforgettable odor. By the time the rescue crews pulled the victims from the wreckage, their bodies were so badly burned they were almost unrecognizable. Mr. White, Dylan Zhao's injuries were too severe. He was pronounced dead on arrival. The officer continued. As for Ms. Shun and her parents, the surgical team is doing everything they can, but the prognosis is not good. I thanked the officer and walked to the surgical wing. I stood before the closed doors of the operating room, a silent, solitary figure. The hours stretched into an eternity. Finally, after more than a dozen hours, the light above the door went out. The lead surgeon emerged, his face etched with exhaustion. He pulled down his mask, his eyes filled with grim resignation. Mr. White, I'm so sorry. Ms. Shin's parents were elderly. Their bodies couldn't handle the trauma. We did everything we could. He paused, his gaze heavy. As for Ms. Shun, she has suffered severe, full-body burns. The impact was directly to the front of the vehicle, causing catastrophic brain trauma. It's very likely she will never wake up. I thanked him again, paid the initial medical bills, and turned to leave. I felt nothing. It was all unfolding just as I had foreseen. There was work to be done. With the Shun family out of the picture, the Smithson Group partnership was in jeopardy. Someone had to take charge. 3 months later, the third phase of the deal was completed. Shin Corp, under my direction, became the undisputed titan of Denver's business scene. But with Claire still in a coma, unable to manage her own company, I stepped in to oversee operations. With the enthusiastic support of the other shareholders, Shin Corp was officially merged into White Industries. The move not only erased my company's recent losses, but catapulted the new, combined entity to the absolute pinnacle of the city's corporate world. The call from the hospital finally came. Mr. White, your wife's will to live is fading. Given the extent of the brain damage, we need to discuss whether you want to continue life support. The doctor's voice was professional, detached, each word a hammer blow that landed with no impact. I gave a simple acknowledgement and hung up. I turned to my assistant, my voice as casual as if I were ordering lunch. Get the car ready. We're leaving. He looked confused. Sir, where are we going? A cold, thin smile stretched across my lips. The hospital, I said. It's time to go see how our little firecracker is doing. At the hospital, after signing the form that officially sealed Claire's fate, I dismissed everyone. You can all go, I said softly. I'd like some time alone with my wife. The door clicked shut, sealing us in silence. I walked to her bedside and stared down at the unrecognizable ruin of her face. The beautiful woman I had married was gone, replaced by a grotesque landscape of scarred, blackened tissue. I sat down and reached out, my fingers gently tracing the horrifying texture of her cheek. You know, Claire, I began, my voice a low murmur. I loved you since we were kids. I kept that love safe for so long, thinking we had a whole lifetime ahead of us. Why did you have to destroy it? Why did you have to be so cruel? You shouldn't have cheated. The moment I found out. Do you have any idea what that felt like? It was like 1,000 needles in my heart. All those years, did they mean nothing to you? And you shouldn't have schemed against my family. For you, for us, I let White Industries take hit after hit. I gave up core assets for Shin Corp without a second thought. And what did I get in return? Your contempt. Your endless, bottomless greed. Do you even have a heart? As I spoke, I saw a single tear escape from her closed eye, tracing a clean path through the scarred terrain of her face before soaking into the white pillowcase. I reached out and wiped it away. It would be the last gentle thing I ever did for her. I took a deep breath and laid the rest of my secrets bare. The truck Dylan was driving, it belonged to a White Industries subsidiary. Funny how it just happened to be parked there, with the keys in the ignition, wasn't it? This was all a setup, Claire. From the very beginning. Smithson Group? That's mine. I built it from the ashes of our failed overseas expansion 3 years ago. You never stood a chance. From the moment you betrayed me, your fate was sealed. And now, Shun Corp belongs to me. It's all over. You can go in peace. Our time in this world is done. As the words left my mouth, Her body began to tremble violently, a final, desperate spasm of life. Perhaps she understood. Perhaps she was terrified. Or perhaps she was finally feeling a shred of regret. I watched her, a faint, detached smile on my face. It was a pointless struggle. Nothing could be changed now. Slowly, gently, I reached out and removed the breathing mask from her face. For a few minutes, the only sound in the room was her ragged, weakening gasps for air. Then her body went still. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor devolved into a single, high-pitched, unending tone. A flat line. Her life was over. Claire, I thought, if there's another world, try to be a better person. And if there's such a thing as reincarnation, I hope we never, ever meet again.